Hi book friends, welcome back to my channel. I am Jen and this is a video all about the top reads of 2024. I did not have a number associated with this video like my top 24 of 24 or my top 10 of 2024. I just wanted to talk about all the books that I loved. All of these books were 5-star. All of these books just take up space in my head and I wouldn't have it any other way. These are in no particular order except for the last 3. The first 3 were all rereads because why would I reread a book that I didn't like? So my first reread was Scythe. This is the first book in a trilogy, the Arc of the Scythe trilogy by Neal Shusterman. This is me and my boyfriend's favorite book of all time because we can literally recommend this to anybody. I have recommended it to middle schoolers and they absolutely love it. And I have also recommended it to many adults and they come back and they tell me that they love it. I have never recommended this book to anybody and when they read it, they told me that they didn't like it. It is a little on the darker side. There is a lot of death involved. But I'm only going to talk about the first book in this video because it was the only one that I reread in 2024. The other ones I will reread in 2025. This is a dystopian sci-fi. And those are some of my favorite genres. My next reread was Harry Potter, the first one and the second one. I do like to reread the whole series once every 5 or so years, and it has been more than 5 years since I have read it, so I thought it was about time. We got passes to Universal Studios, so I loaded Harry Potter up on my Kindle and I read it while I was waiting in line for rides. And it was a great experience to be reading Harry Potter while waiting in line at King's Cross Station. These books will never be less than a 5-star for me. And the last reread I did was the Queen of the Tearling series. This is actually a 3-book series, and then there's a 4th book that's a prequel. I have not read the 4th book yet. But what I love about this series is that from the front, it looks like your run-of-the-mill fantasy with a long-lost queen who comes to retake over her kingdom when she comes of age. But the more you read, the more you find out that that is not it at all. There are portals. There's magic. There's even a little bit of time travel. Highly recommend the Queen of the Tearling series. So those were all of my rereads. Let's move on to the books that I read for the first time in 2024. Again, these are in no particular order, except for the last 3. The Women by Kristen Hanna. This is a look at the role that women played both overseas and here at home during the Vietnam War. It focuses particularly on one woman who goes over to Vietnam as a nurse, what she experiences over there, and the unexpected circumstances that she experiences when she comes home. I learned so much about the time period of the Vietnam War, and it was such an emotional read. I highly recommend it to everybody, especially women. The next book is The Raven's Tale, and I do not think I would recommend this book to everybody. If you like Edgar Allan Poe and if you are familiar with his life and his works, I think you're going to eat this book up. If you're not as familiar with him, I don't think that you will get the same feelings reading this book. This is a fictional story, but it does draw from real things that happened in Edgar Allan Poe's life. And this follows him throughout his teenage years, and he has a muse, Lenore, who essentially comes to life. But you do learn a lot about his life going through college, about his home life and the relationship with his foster father. And all of these were pulled from factual documents about Edgar Allan Poe's life. 2024 was the year of Sanderson, and I say the year of Sanderson, but it wasn't the only year of Sanderson because 2025 is also going to be the year of Sanderson, maybe even 2026. But I did read Warbreaker in 2024. This is a standalone fantasy. And just like everything that I've ever read by Brandon Sanderson, 5 stars. The Thursday Murder Club. This is a book that was on my shelf for a long time. And I finally picked it up just because I was tired of seeing it on my shelf. And I loved it. This is, if you can get cozy with murder mystery, this is a cozy murder mystery. It follows 4 individuals who live in a retirement community. They get together every Thursday and try to solve cold cases. But then something happens very close to them and they decide that they're going to try to help solve the mystery. My favorite thing about this book are the characters. There are 4 of them, and they are so adorable, and I feel so attached to them after only reading 2 books. There are 2 more books that I'm going to read soon. But I'm a little bit afraid because they are elderly, and I am worried that something's going to happen to at least one of them that's not good in the next 2 books, and that makes me a little bit afraid to continue on in the series. But I love this book. I actually read this with a group of people, and everybody that read this book absolutely loved it. My daughter even picked it up, and she loved it. The next one I read for a video where I was reading romance books that were on my radar, but I decided I wasn't going to read them just because I have so many other books to read. And these were all books that were on Kindle Unlimited. I read 3 romance books to see if I was missing out, and I was. I read All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. Slow burn, and I loved it. I definitely will be picking up more by Mariana Zapata. The next one is a romantasy that sort of took the Booktube, BookTok, book social media by storm, and that is a YA romantasy, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I went into this not knowing what to expect because YA is not always my favorite, but I loved it. I loved the trials. It reminded me of Hunger Games. The only bad thing about this book, and it's not even really a bad thing, it's just something that sort of bothered me a little bit, was that instead of taking inspiration from some books like Hunger Games, I feel like some of the books that inspired Lauren Roberts, she wrote a little too close to the real thing. She didn't put enough of her spin on it. That being said, it was still a 5-star read. Book 2 was not a 5-star read, but it did leave at a cliffhanger that is making me highly anticipate the 3rd book, which I think comes out in April, and that's Fearless. The next book is a sci-fi book where I ate up the 1st book. Loved the 1st book. The 2nd book, not so much. And that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This book follows Darrow. He is a red. This world is divided up into a caste system based on colors. And he has grown up underground on Mars as a miner. He is just digging for ore in a very, very dangerous job. And he thinks that he is doing this so that one day in the future people can live on the surface of Mars. Well, he finds out that what he thinks is going on the surface is not at all what is going on. And he fights back, rising up through the caste system, infiltrating groups, putting his life on the line over and over again. And I loved this book. The 2nd book, Golden Sun, took me so long to get through. It was so much battle, so much scientific talk, but I did really, really enjoy the ending. I think I'm going to read Morningstar eventually after I do some rereads of the first 2 books, or maybe some just like recap videos. And if I don't like Morningstar, then I think I am going to walk away from the series. There are 6 books in the series right now. I think the 7th is coming out fairly soon. The sun is doing this weird thing behind the clouds, and it's making the lighting very weird in here. All right, the next one is a YA romance, and the only reason I picked it up is because it is by my favorite romance author, and that is Ali Hazelwood. That is Check and Mate. I would never have touched this book with a 10-foot pole. It's YA, and it's about chess, and I don't even know how to play chess. But because it was by Ali Hazelwood, I picked it up, and I loved it. My favorite thing about this book was the inner monologue of the female main character and the banter between her and the male main character. She was so funny and so sarcastic and so witty. And it doesn't even matter if you know anything about chess. I actually learned so much, not necessarily about the game of chess, but just the chess world in general and what goes on behind the scenes as far as competitions go and the training be entered into these competitions. Ali Hazelwood did it again. This book, I like to say, is about myself. The Bookish Life of Nina Hill. I feel like I am Nina Hill. Except for that I'm not single, and I have children, and I don't work in a bookstore. But I feel like I could very easily be Nina Hill. She is single. She works in a bookstore. All she wants in life is to work in this bookstore, come home and read and hang out with her cats. She is part of a trivia team that meets every week, so she does have some social life. And she ends up meeting somebody on a rival trivia team. But then some things start to happen in her personal life involving her father and some long-lost family and a whole lot of money. And I just loved the way that Nina Hill handled all of these situations throughout the book. I definitely related to her big time. One of the first books I read in 2024 was Wayward. And what I loved about this book was it followed 3 women who at first don't seem connected, but then their stories start to weave. And these 3 women are from 3 completely different times. We have somebody in the present day, we have somebody about 100 years ago, and we have another woman in, I think, like the 1600s. They're all witches. And this book was so strong on female empowerment. And of course, we had the magic element that just made it so much fun. There is another book coming out by the same author called The Sirens. I think it's coming out this year. And from what I can tell, it follows the same structure of 3 different women, or at least 3 different characters in 3 different time periods. And another Brandon Sanderson made it on the list, and it's another standalone, and this one is Elantris. I liked Elantris even better than I liked Warbreaker, even though they were both 5-star. I loved the female main character. I loved the plot. I loved the unique storyline. I loved the ending. There was a character who I did not like. I did not like his POV throughout the entire book. But then at the end, he rose to the occasion and he had a quote that really hit close to me. And that made the book even that much better. I love when a character has such a drastic character arc. This book is one that I just read this month in December. I read it for a book club with Books and Heather. And it is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. My favorite thing about this book was the magic system. It was so unique. It reminded me of computer coding, but with spells. So instead of writing lines of code, you wrote lines of spells in this magical typewriter type of an instrument called a spellograph. But this book digs so deep into the way women are treated. There are so many metaphors and so much symbolism in this book regarding women's rights. But it also talks about the way immigrants are treated, people that are different than you and how they're treated. On the surface, this was just a book about magic. But under the surface, it is so much more. Highly recommend this book. I do have The Sword of Kaigan by the same author on my Kindle, and I'm hoping to get to that very soon. And that brings us to the top 3, and these are in order. So number 3 is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This was another book that I read for a book club with Books and Heather. I'm not new to cozy fantasy. I love cozy fantasy. I don't think I've ever read a cozy fantasy book that I didn't like. But this one was just top-notch. The vibes, the atmosphere, the relationships, the sentient spider plant named Kaz. I thought about this book so much in the days after I read it. This is about a girl named Kiela. That's at least how I pronounce her name. She's a librarian in the capital. There is some sort of a rebellion. She's worried that the library is going to catch on fire. So she takes her spider plant and all of these really important spell books and she flees to her home island. And once she's there, she finds the house that she used to live in. It's all overgrown because her parents have passed away. She sets up a life in this house. And she starts to make jam and sell jam as a way to barter and get supplies. But then she sees that this island is struggling. So she decides that the jam is going to just be a front for her actually selling magical remedies to help this island thrive. However, that's illegal. So she has to really be careful about it. This was the coziest of coziest fantasies. And the next book comes out in 2025. Number 2 on the list is a book that I literally finished last night and it took me 2 months to read. It's the first book that I've ever annotated. I took my time with it and it is the first book in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive and it was The Way of Kings. Holy Brandon Sanderlange. The last 200 pages of this book were so amazing. There were so many like twists and turns. I feel so connected to these characters. Somebody asked me when I told them that I had finished it who my favorite character was, and I gave them an answer. But I don't even know if that is the right answer because there are so many characters in this book that I feel so strongly about for different reasons. And I know that this is a very long series, and I'm hoping to be caught up and read the next 4 books in 2025. I cannot recommend Brandon Sanderson enough. And that brings me to my number 1 book of 2025. And it is a book that I was not expecting to like this much. And in fact, my daughter also read it and she loved it just as much as I do. I have a book sleeve in the works for tattoos on this arm. And I do want to add a symbol from this book to my tattoo sleeve eventually. And that is Remarkably Bright Creatures. I highly recommend listening to this on audio because the narrator who narrates the voice of the octopus, Marcellus, has the most darling accent, and it adds so much more to this book. I don't really know what this book is classified. Is it like literary fiction, contemporary fiction? I don't really know, but there is a magical element in it. And it's not really magic. It's not really fantasy. It's just that the octopus talks, but he doesn't talk out loud to characters in the books. He talks to you, the reader. This octopus lives in an aquarium. He is super observant, super, super smart. And he befriends a woman who comes and becomes the janitor at this aquarium. She's retired, but she decides that she needs something to do. So she becomes the janitor at this aquarium. They strike up a friendship. But because he is so observant, he actually leads her to discover some things about a son that she had that died many years ago. When I tell you I cried at this book, I cried at this book. I cannot recommend this book enough. If you like any genre of book, you will like Remarkably Bright Creatures. So that's it. 2024 was a wonderful reading year. I do plan on making a video of the worst books of 2024. And the good news about that is it'll be a much shorter video because there were not that many books that I disliked. All of my socials are linked below. I would love to connect with you on any of those platforms in 2025. I appreciate your likes, your comments, your subscribes. And until next time, happy reading.